Hello, listeners. Welcome to an emergency episode of Geopolitical Cousins. Marko and I drop everything to talk about the burgeoning Israel-Iran war. You can write to me at jacob@jacobshapiro.com if you want to get to me and Marko with any thoughts or anything else. Otherwise, as you can tell by how fast I'm talking, I should slow down. I've had a lot of coffee and there's lots to do today. Take care of yourselves. We will see you out there.
I don't know how much time you have, but I have full two.
I've got one, but
okay. Let's crush it then.
Let's crush it. We're live. Go for it.
All right, Jacob. We got to talk about a serious situation that I'm afraid we didn't really hit on right away. The Taliban have struck again, and we now all expect Oklahoma City Thunder to retaliate, and we have to see what that looks like.
Marko, this is why we're cousins, because I literally was thinking of introing the same way. And guys, Marko was so excited. He was like, no, I want to do the intro this time. And you did it so you could do that joke. And I was going to do that joke
man.
too. Yes, the Pacers are up 2-1. What asymmetric means are the Thunder going to use now that... Yeah, I'm totally...
None. I mean, they're conventional, right? It's the asymmetry that's winning. Anyways, okay, so we're here, emergency pod, obviously, because Israel has struck Iran. They have struck Iran's nuclear site in singular.
Sites. No. They also, it's not clear how much damage they did at Fordo, but it looks like Fordo also incurred some damage as well.
That's interesting. Okay, so more than just Natanz. Natanz appears to be the one that was struck like heavily, but
yeah. We at least have video of smoke. We should say to the listeners, like, it's Friday, June 13th, 10:04 a.m. Central. What is it? 8 a.m. Pacific.
It's 8
We're gonna push this out as quickly as we can. But this is the fog of war. So all the initial reporting will probably turn out to be wrong. And some of the things that we talk about may even be overtaken by events, like by the time that you're listening to this. So like take everything with a grain of salt. The hardest part of doing analysis in this cycle of an attack like this is we don't even know what we know. But yeah, we'll try and parse through it.
That's true. And I obviously agree with everything you say, but I do sometimes feel that my first gut reaction is the best.
Yeah, no, I think there's something to be said for, I find gut and instinct is really important, an important tool in an analyst's
Well, I think, you know what it is? I think because as the situation develops, oftentimes the two sides have an interest in flagging that they can deviate from their constraints. Mm-hmm. They can do more than what you would have thought at the onset of the crisis. But the truth is that they can't. And that's why sometimes day one analysis is better than day 5. Obviously, day 30 is going to be better. I don't disagree with that. But the difference between day 1 analysis and day 5 analysis is often very, very profound. And it's because over the next 5 days, you're likely to have your fate in your framework shaken. Think about April 2nd reciprocal tariffs. What happened over the course of the next 5 days? I mean, most people said, no, they're serious. They're not going to negotiate. Look, Peter Navarro's on TV saying they're not. That's because both sides at this point right now, Israel, Iran, US, everybody has an interest in fronting, in saying, hold me back. I got more than you think I have. Anyways, sorry to interrupt on that, but let's go over everything that's happened. So there's reports that Israel used actually a ground incursion. There's reports that there were actually some Israeli commandos that they might have taken some of the scientists. From what I understand, there's 2 very high-ranking military officials in Iran that have been targeted for assassination. Several Iranian military bases were struck. Multiple strikes in Tehran. Not clear what, other than, of course, some of the residential areas where officials were living, like scientists and military policymakers and so on. Natanz, Fordo, not the Bushehr, a nuclear power plant, from what I understand. Of course, that one is legitimately for civilian use, although everything is, of course, part of the nuclear program. I don't know, am I missing anything else on Israel's? 200 fighter jets were involved. Doesn't seem that refueling planes were involved, but they probably were. I think U.S. has delivered 1 to Israel.
There's a lot unclear about that. A couple things. The first is, so we have some confirmed deaths this morning. So the chief of staff of the armed forces, Mohammed. I'm not a Farsi speaker. I'm an Arabic speaker, so I apologize for butchering these names. But Major General Mohammed Bagheri, I think is his name. Then you've got General Hossein Salami, not Soleimani, Salami, who is the new commander in chief of the IRGC. He is gone. Then you've got a deputy commander of the armed forces, a head of the airspace unit of the IRGC taken out. At least one politician has been taken out, Ali Shamkhani, who is an influential Iranian politician. He's a close confidant of the supreme leader. He was overseeing the nuclear talks with the United States, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Like not just an assault on Iran, but an assault on the nuclear deal and
on
the negotiations itself.
On diplomacy itself.
I know. And like some nuclear scientists taken out as well. There has been some video on social media of Israeli refueling airplanes. It's not clear whether they're legit. It's not clear whether it's over Iranian airspace or over Syrian airspace or over Iraqi airspace. Marco, I don't know if you remember Simtak, though. He was on my podcast a couple weeks ago, and he talked about how when Assad fell, one of the things Israel did was it very quietly bombed the shit out of Syrian air defense so that Syria's skies are basically open to Israel if it wants them to be. So part of me is thinking maybe what made this a little more realistic than even I would have given Israel credit for is maybe they're able to refuel over Syria, or maybe they're less worried about incurring things over Syria. And then the other part that I would add to your summary of what happened is the sort of, I don't want to say strange, but the U.S. role in all of this, because the initial response last night when you and I were texting was from Marco Rubio that was basically Israel took unilateral action. We are not involved with this. Iran should not attack us. And then you wake up to Trump on Truth Social saying, I gave Iran a chance. They can still make a deal if they want, but there's more coming, and Israel is like going to, basically destroy them. And then you had Axios, Wall Street Journal reporting this morning that not only is the United States okay with this, but that the United States knew and that the United States participated in the deception to lull Iran into a false sense of security by telling them it's not going to happen. There's going to be more time here. The United States is not for this. I don't know quite how to run that down. I think you're also right to point out that there are multiple Israeli security sources that are talking about the Mossad being on the ground in Iran in much the same way that Ukraine was on the ground in Russia with their big attack. So, precision guided weapons located next to Iranian surface-to-air missile systems, drones, actual commando units going after scientists, things like that. And I think part of that, there's two parts of that. Number one, and I was just talking to an Iranian security expert for my other podcast, it's a sophisticated social media and publicity campaign too, because Israel is all over Persian social media, putting out things about how this is an assault on the regime, not on the Iranian people, that the Iranian regime has been attacking you, Israel is attacking this, and sort of sowing those seeds of doubt. But yeah, obviously a huge intelligence operation that had to come forward there too. And then the last thing I would just add to the summary, and I'm curious for your takes on all of this, Marco, but in some ways, one of the most blunt statements about what Israel has done thus far. Because if you like the French, I don't know if you saw Macron's statement. He was like, we condemn Iran and its nuclear program, like relatively softy from some of these other countries. But Saudi Arabia, I will quote the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, expresses its strong condemnation and denunciation of blatant Israeli aggression against the brotherly Islamic Republic of Iran, which undermine sovereignty and security and constitute a clear violation of international law and norms. So the Saudis, at least rhetorically, like slapping the Israelis on the wrist. Maybe behind the scenes, Mohammed bin Salman is like popping the champagne on the yacht. I don't know. But that's at least my list of things also to add to what you said.
Well, we should probably start with the last one. I know that our listeners might think that's bizarre to start with the Saudi statement. But the Saudi statement is the most important one. I mean, if you're listening to this and wondering what's going to happen to your retirement, what's going to happen to the global economy, it's really the Saudi-Iran relationship that matters more than anything. I've said many times, by the way, I think our second podcast was about this.
Yeah, it was.
About war in Iran. I've said many times this year and last year, Iran and Israel can go at it. They can do whatever they want to each other, and nothing will happen to the rest of the world. So this is a very important point. Iran and Israel can have a full-out war for the next 2 years, and it may be like a tree that falls in the forest that nobody hears.
tree that falls in the oasis or the desert. I don't know.
In the desert, yeah, the date tree falls over. So why? Because look, Iran has to close the Straits of Hormuz for this to be taken seriously by anybody listening to this. I'm assuming that Iranian regime is not listening to this. You guys should take this seriously. Israel is going at it. But other than that, I mean, look, the way that this conflict articulates itself in oil prices, in gold prices, in stock prices, is that Iran has to close the Straits of Hormuz. And if the Houthis can close the Red Sea, if the Houthis can do that to the Red Sea, I mean, Iran could do that to the Straits of Hormuz. And I just want to explain this because this is kind of complicated. Iran cannot really conventionally retaliate, successfully at least, against Israel or really anyone. It can, shoot some ballistic missiles and drones. That's unfortunate for people on the receiving end, but it's not tragic.
Well, and to that point, apparently Iran sent its first salvo of drones. Israel warned its population to get ready and then sent out we got them all, don't worry, you can go back to your life. So, I mean, just like laying it on.
But you know what? That also shows multiple things, Jacob. It means that Iran did not have a plan to retaliate. Like, ready to go. Like, this is one of those things, like, this is something that might happen. Like, I live in California. We may have a huge earthquake. I have rubber boots. I have water. I have supply of food. Like, I have flashlights. Like, if there's an earthquake right now, my family and I are not like, oh, well, let's send some drones. I don't know. Like, no. Like, why isn't there a ballistic attack? Why isn't there a huge salvo? Like, why are they not ready? Instead, it's like some 100 drones. Like, it's very amateurish. But let's leave that aside. I mean, look, the point is, while Iran's military is incredibly dilapidated, there's an asymmetry to it in that closing a shipping lane doesn't require that much sophistication. You can do it with drones. You're attacking civilian tankers, okay? They're undefended. So you can really make it difficult for ships to transit with very low sophistication. Houthis have proven that. And so while Iran has no ability to conventionally fight a war with really Israel or conventionally to threaten American forces in the region, they just don't. They have enough sophistication to close shipping, cause oil prices to go up, but they haven't done it. Why? Because of two reasons. One, that will invite massive retaliation from the United States of America. The kind that turns you into a parking lot. And Iran has no way to defend against that. So it's kind of crossing the Rubicon. That is the nuclear option, actually. It's not nuclear weapons. It would be closing the Straits of Hormuz. Once you do that, it's fair game. At that point, even China is like, hey, America, please, can you turn Iran into a parking lot? So that's the first issue. The second issue is that it would tip the scales of conflict in the region so vastly against Iran because it would invite Saudi participation, as you point out. Iran is holding on to some very nice, juicy assets for the long term. One of them is Iraq. It's holding on to Iraq because the Saudis effectively ceded Iraq to Iran when they negotiated their 2022 détente. And so there's a quid pro quo. Saudi Arabia said to Iran, you can have Iraq, you can control it through your proxies, political and militant, but you leave us alone. No more drone attacks against our energy facilities. And notice that this détente has held from October 7th, 2023 onwards. It's held through the Iran-Israel missile strikes in 2024. They were unprecedented, that people thought would cause oil prices to go through the roof. They didn't. It's held throughout the Houthi, who are allied with Iran, not proxies, allied, throughout the Houthi drone campaign against shipping in the Red Sea. Notice how all the drones went south, as if their joystick controls are stuck in the south position. None of them went north to Saudi facilities or Persian Gulf. Why not? I mean, hey, Houthis, if you want to make a big splash about what's going on in Gaza, shut down the Straits of Hormuz. It's kind of equidistant to the Red Sea. So why haven't the Houthis done that? Because Iran told them not to. Iran and Saudi Arabia have a détente, and it's a very important one, and it's the most important part of this story today. It's not about Israeli capabilities or cool special forces or the next movie that will be directed about like their incursion. Like everyone's like obsessing about silly little military stuff. The most important question is what will happen in terms of Iranian retaliation? And will they rip off the Band-Aid? Will they cross the Rubicon, whatever analogy you want, and attack Saudi facilities and shipping through the Persian Gulf? And my answer is no. And that's why that Saudi statement is so important, because the Saudis are saying, like, look, guys, like, this is between you. Actually, no, they're not even saying that. They're actually saying, like, yo, Israel is the bad guy. They're straight up saying Israel's the bad guy. Yeah. Which is not that much of a shift. I mean, they've been saying that really since October 7th and throughout 2024, although they did participate allegedly in shooting down some projectiles that were flying over Saudi territory. And, the way they justify that to Iran is like, hey, man, like, you don't need to fly over Saudi Arabia to hit Israel. Like, look at the map, bro. Like, so please don't. Yeah, we're going to defend our airspace. Like, that wasn't really, like, a lot of people in the West thought that this was pro-Israeli. It's not. They're defending their airspace. So I think this is why, Jacob, my hot take on this is Iran does have the capability to disrupt shipping and cause oil prices to go up $100. But there's two things that if they do that, there's two bad effects that will happen to them. American military is not as hot as people think it is. But let me be very, very clear. There's one thing that the United States of America does better than any country in history. I mean, and not better, like it's number one. It's like number 1, 2,000. Nobody pulverizes you from 30,000 feet like the U.S. Air Force. When America doesn't care about invading, when America doesn't care about putting boots on the ground, when it doesn't care what you do to your own people, when it doesn't care about turning you into Wisconsin and making sure you have like Wendy's on every corner, when America just wants to flatten you, it's unrivaled. And so if Iran crosses that Rubicon, it will be punished. And then the second issue is that if they cross it, if they get on the bad side of Saudi Arabia, they tilt the regional balance vastly against themselves. Basically, Saudi resources, but also Saudi intelligence capabilities in Iraq will then be activated against Iranian interests. And then, it's really game over for a little semblance of hegemony that Iran still has.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you betrayed your lack of knowledge of the geopolitics of the Midwest, because it wouldn't be a Wendy's on every corner. It would be a Culver's. And I hope that the 5 Wisconsin listeners that we have really appreciate that call out from yours truly, because I've eaten enough of those cheeseburgers. And I'm on a perpetual quest as a Jew to find the greatest cheeseburger in the history of the world, which is, funny for lots of different reasons. We can get into that another time. Well, I have 2 or 3 things I want to say in response to what you said, because I can get along with most of what you said, but I want to think about it also from a different angle, which is, it seems to me analytically, or one of the things I'm trying to parse is, was this an attack on Iran's nuclear capability to set it back or to wipe it out? Or is this really an attempt at regime change? Because Israel has also said, look, this is not a one-day thing. We're ready to go for the next 2 weeks. And the Israeli population is ready to endure whatever it has to do for the next 2 weeks. We took out all those guys that I mentioned in the first wave. You also saw what we did to Hezbollah. Like, the unsaid thing there is, Supreme Leader Khamenei, where are you? Do you feel safe where you are? President of Iran, where are you? Do you feel safe where you are? You shouldn't. And this is the other thing that's sort of part of this, which is, Iran's military dilapidated, fine. But this is not just about an inability to have conventional offensive counterattack capability. It looks like Israel has just decimated their ability to defend themselves.
Yes.
I mean, at least here on June 3rd at 10 o'clock in the morning, like this, I don't want to say, it's a little cavalier for me to say that Iranian skies belong to Israel, but Israel is hitting whatever
100%.
it wants, however often it wants, with fighter jets that I know can't, these are long distance flights that the Israelis are having to take. So unless they're secretly going off a U.S. carrier, or out of Azerbaijan or something like that, aggregators, I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying, unless there's some secret here we don't know about, they're going along sort of distance.
I don't think we're big enough to be aggregated. But Jacob,
we might be after this. Times of crisis or when people listen in. But the reason I bring that up is because it's twofold. Number one, you're right, as long as this Iranian regime stays in place. But what if, and it's a huge gamble, and I'm not sure they're going to pull it off, what if this is the end of the Islamic Republic? That's a whole big thing. And then the second thing I just want to say, and then you can take the wheel, is, you said the nuclear option was the Strait of Hormuz. This now gets to the question of how far advanced is Iran with a nuclear weapon itself? Because if it's advanced enough to where the supreme leader was just saying, don't do the final screws because I want to be able to have this negotiation process. But if it could be very simply just sort of, hey, let's complete the process really fast and have a bomb. The thing that strikes me is Iran's back is against the wall. Their conventional defenses have failed. They have no legitimate counterattack that they can go to. Any attack that they do on, Persian Gulf shipping, anything else like that, is going to bring down the goat of long-range bombardment on them, or is going to break the Saudi thing, which is, it would be really nice to have a nuclear deterrent right now. This is the whole reason they want the nuclear deterrent. Their proxies, by the way, are also gone. Hezbollah is sitting it out. Houthis, nowhere to be found. They're not going to affect this. So if you could have a nuke, like, now would be the time to show it off and say, okay, if you keep coming at us, like, here's a dirty bomb for you. Like, we will go this far. Like, I was sort of having that crazy thought as I was thinking about all this.
No, that's not crazy at all. No, that's not crazy at all. So first, I think I don't think regime change is possible. Like, Israel has not been able to do regime change in Gaza. Why would it be able to do it in Iran?
If it can assassinate the Hezbollah leadership, and if, let's say, they take out the president of Iran and the supreme leader,
I think that just replaces them, right? I mean, we've seen this story play out with Hezbollah and Hamas as well. Syria,
but those are like little jihadist groups that hide in bunkers. This is a state that governs 80 plus million people, a large swath of whom want nothing to do with these guys.
But I mean, maybe, there is also the circling of the wagons that happens. I mean, while vast majority of Iranians don't want to follow their leadership, they're also anti-Israeli, so it can backfire. And the counter that you should send at me, the counter is Syria, right? But Syria was a country, it's a great example of what happens when you completely isolate yourself. Syria had Turkey against Assad. You had Saudi Arabia raid. I mean, Israel, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and the United States of America were all on the same side. So that's a good example of what happens, why you don't want to isolate yourself. There's also actual militants on the territory of Syria. So this isn't, I've heard this regime change theory a lot today. And I just, I don't think that that's where Israel is able to go, but it doesn't matter. Look, let's array some of the things that you've said. In terms of military capabilities, Israel has some refueling capacity, Boeing 707s. They haven't received the KCs yet, which they've had an order since 2020. So that hasn't been delivered actually yet. So they have some domestic ones, but it's not as sophisticated as what the Americans would give them if they actually delivered the U.S. airplanes. So they're going to have to do this in waves of fighter jets. Mm-hmm. The problem with fighter jets is that they're vulnerable to air defenses. And this is where your point is so critical. Where is Iran's vaunted S-300s? They've clearly been disabled. Last year's attack that Israel performed, if you remember, it was a single strike. And everybody was kind of confused what that single strike was. It apparently targeted the radar installations for the S-300s, sending a message to Iran that we can blind you. So it appears that that's what's happened. So it's fine. Like, Israel now has control over skies, as you said. The problem for Israel is that its tools for navigating Iran's skies are still limited. Attacking with fighter jets, there's a problem. They have to be fully loaded with fuel, mm-hmm. which means they cannot carry as much ordnance. And the ordnance that they carry is limited, particularly because the U.S., as is now very much known, and has been known for decades, the U.S. has not provided Israel with the bunker buster technology that's required to fully damage Fordo. Fordo is 40 meters underground. Some say half a mile. I didn't know that. I thought it was just 40 meters. Doesn't matter. Many of the tunnels are at 90-degree angles. Bunker buster technology can't deal with that. You need what the Americans have, which can completely destroy much deeper, much wider range of penetration. That's not what Israelis have. So this attack ultimately is not going to completely destroy Iran's nuclear program. I think that there's limits to how much Israel can do. And that's why I think that ultimately we have to also consider that both sides are limited in what they can do. And that's where the U.S. is so important. In a way, Israel wants to draw Americans in. This has
Yes.
been for a long time a theory. Like, what if Israel just does kind of like a halfway attack, hopes that Iran retaliates in a way that matters to America, like attacks the air base in Qatar, attacks the Fifth Fleet headquarters in Manama, Bahrain. The military bases in Iraq are, I think, fair game at this point. It's fine. Iran has attacked them before many times. But if Iran retaliates against the U.S. or shipping interests in the Straits of Hormuz, then this attack, from a strategic perspective for Israel, is a win. If it doesn't, it's kind of like not a win. In fact, it probably accelerates the nuclear program, as you pointed out, where Iran needs that breakout capacity as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, and maybe the precedent was already set. Like I can hear an Israeli strategist telling me I'm a weenie for what I'm about to say, but I mean, this is a preemptive strike while Iran was negotiating with the United States. Like, and yes, Israel is from a technological capacity, military capacity, is so far advanced than all of the rivals that are around it in the Middle East that nobody can compete with them. But that's not always going to be the case. Like we did our geopolitical power ranking a couple of episodes ago, and I left Israel off the top 20 because I said, I mean, they're there today, but 20, 30 years from now, like we don't think that some of these other countries are going to be able to develop either nuclear weapons or drone technologies or do the things that Israel is doing to Iran. And now Israel's done it first. So, if you are Iran, or let's say you're Turkey or some jihadist group in the future, like the precedent has already been broken. So I don't know, maybe people don't care about precedents, but the continued breakdown of international norms, which is also part of that Saudi statement, like the rules are gone. Like it's okay, fine, like go, like bomb Iran. There's going to be no like consequences. Like nobody's going to punish you for it,
Well,
and nobody's going
Iran,
to see like, yeah,
look,
Iran if they can, but
it's up to Iran to punish. And if they can't, then they probably should have not supported Hezbollah Hamas. I mean, like these are consequences to what Iran does as well. And
yeah,
that's where I think, you can understand this attack by Israel, even if they cannot actually hurt Fordo, which is where all the enrichment facility, all the important centrifuges are for the enrichment. So I don't think that Israel has managed to overcome technological deficiencies that it has. Of course, the nuclear program is also more than just centrifuges.
it's
It's also
people, and they're going
humans.
after people, and they've been going after people for a while.
For
So
a while, that's all. That's fine. I mean, but here's the issue though. We also have to consider domestic politics of Israel as well. There's
mhm.
clearly pressure on Netanyahu to basically, continue with aggressive foreign and military policies, whether in Lebanon, in Gaza, or Iran. He can't survive without that. There has to be a perpetual war for him to stay in power. And the reason I say that is not to criticize him. I mean, God bless him. He can do whatever he wants. That's his choice. The issue, though, is that it does over the long term. It doesn't, like, his domestic political logic is likely not this is not as beneficial for Israel in the long term. And that is something I would point out as well. I mean, if oftentimes domestic political logic will impede the geopolitical goals over the long term. And I think one of the problems here is that it's not clear to me that regime change would change anything for Israel.
In Iran,
In Iran, yes. And I think any country in this region is likely going to want to have a nuclear weapon, like after this attack. That's
yeah, I mean that I think is already true. I think you're underplaying the potential significance of regime change, and I actually think we're seeing this played out right now with Syria. I don't know if you saw, like a week or two ago, Netanyahu basically said, "We want the United States to broker peace talks with the new Syrian government," and Syria seems to be open to it. That is I mean, Israel's wanted, some kind of, Jordan or Egypt level relationship with Syria since literally the 1970s, and hasn't been able to get it because Assad was, sort of sticking to those old things. So if you can, and now Syria is led by some former jihadists, and like they're going to be willing to sit down with Israel to reach some kind of agreement, probably yes, because they don't want to keep getting bombed by their more sophisticated neighbor. They're going to play a longer game going forward. But I think if you could take down like the theocratic, thuggish element that runs Iran. And if you could get secularists in power, I mean, that would be pretty powerful for Israel. I think that would be a really big deal.
I think that is the conventional view. I think that is the Israeli view. And I think that in a way that's going to probably allow the regime in Iran to survive longer. Because again, it's not Lebanon, it's not Gaza. It's a very large place. You can hide in a lot of different places. The idea that Israel is going to be able to take, I just don't see that. But, I could be wrong, obviously.
Well, I don't know, but let's say for the sake of argument that they can. Like, let's say they assassinate the supreme leader and the president in the next strike. I'm not saying
find
it's
other
probable.
ones.
Well, do you find other ones, or do people rise up and say we're replacing? Because there's already factions waiting for this, waiting to fight it out when the supreme leader dies. Like, there's internal incoherence within the Iranian political establishment.
He's very
already.
Old and sick. Yeah.
And he's also been trying to put his son forward to replace him, which is like, wow, like the Iranian Revolution only took 40 years to die. Like, the whole idea was we're not going to have monarchies and the Shah passing things down to his stupid son. Like, okay, so now the supreme leadership passes down like through hereditary means, which has gotten a lot of pushback there as well. But also think back to the Rouhani government and how Rouhani was trying to take the reins away from the IRGC, and he got his sort of hand slapped on it. I was talking to this Iranian security expert before we got on, and he talked about, to him, one of the most impressive things about what Israel was doing was a sophisticated social media campaign in Persian going after Iranian social media. And he said there were basically two feelings on Iranian social media. One was, this is not good, we don't want to be attacked by Israel, sort of rally around the flag thing. But the second aspect, he said, was there was also this very real undercurrent of, well, we don't care if the IRGC commander gets got. He was killing young Iranian protesters in the streets as recently as a couple of months ago. And this supreme leader guy who's trying to basically put the Shah back on top of us, except with Shiite theocratic, antiquated ideas. Would we really be that sad? Like, yes, we'll have our problems with Israel, but there's also some level of, okay, this is okay. It's not like we love this regime that much and that there aren't internal tensions there. And for Israel, if you could just, I'm not saying you're going to make Iran your best friend, but if you could at least get it from, hey, you're the great Satan, we're going to wipe you off the face of the earth, to, hey, we're not friends, let's have negotiations.
Little Satan, let's be clear. But listen, I hear all that. It's just that's just not the way the world works, though. It does in the long term. It does in the long term. But I would have to dig deep into the historical bag to find a case where something like that happens during the conflict.
You don't think Syria qualify? I guess Syria was a longer thing. It
just doesn't. It's been first of all, Assad didn't have control over more than 50% of the territory. There was a civil war. There was a militant group. It's not like Israel caused regime change in Syria. They aided it. They were a great participant in it, but there was clearly a civil war since 2011.
Okay, so what about Japan, 1945?
Okay, fine. Yes. Great example, Jacob. I will concede once Israel nukes Iran and invades it with 1 million men. Yes. So this is my point. But listen. Here's a counter.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of both supports my view and your view. 1999 NATO air campaign against Serbia. Okay, I can tell you, it definitely did not, in the moment, incite any anti-Milosevic sentiment. Even pro-democracy, liberal people in Belgrade were standing on bridges with little targets saying to NATO, bomb us. Right? But basically 12 months later, when you took stock of the situation and said, what was all this for? There was the revolution in October of 2000.
Yeah.
So but that's a different situation too. I mean, Serbia took on the entire alliance of NATO. And NATO can do a lot of damage. Israel can't. Israel cannot do that level of damage. So my question,
unless it nukes them.
Right. Well, yeah. Okay. Yes. But my point is that even in that situation, it took some time before people took that stock of hey, what was this all for? So I'm not saying that regime change can't come as a result of this. I just think it will be sometime later. This is one of the many moments in Iran's story that lead to the realization by the vast majority of the people of that country, like, this is stupid. Like, we can't even retaliate against Israel. So what's the whole point of all of this? And I think that's possible. I would rather kind of focus, because it's a more of a longer term theme and it's not going to happen overnight. Mm-hmm. Iran is a more sophisticated political system than like Gaza or Hezbollah. And I just feel a lot of commentary today. It's like, if they just put some bombs in pagers, like, no, it's going to be more difficult than that. Nonetheless, for all their sophistication, size, strength, inherent kind of geopolitical value, like, their S-300s are clearly completely useless. Their air defense system, the surface-to-air missile S-300s they got from Russia, fairly sophisticated, has not made a dent. As you pointed out, Israel can pretty much fly in and out. It can be just like a routine flight for their fighter jets, across the region. And that's a real problem, because what do you do at this point? They're kind of like North Korea. Iran is kind of like North Korea. And let me explain what I mean. There's very few ways to retaliate in limited way.
Yeah.
You either, fly some drones to Israel, which Israel just destroys, or you go for broke and you shut down the Straits of Hormuz. And then, yes, we should talk about regime change. Because once the U.S. starts using something that Israel does not have, which is long-range strategic bombers, you're cooked. You're completely and utterly cooked. And at that point, you are risking regime survival. You can block off the Straits of Hormuz, well done, because civilian shipping, again, can't really evade anti-ship cruise missiles, which Iran has, can't really evade even little dinghies, little Zodiac boats with like a dude with a shoulder-launched surface-to-air missile, like whatever. Like, it's a real problem.
Yeah. Well,
but
so I think that's an important question. I think that's an important question that you just landed on. So let me rephrase it back at you, because one of my clients this morning asked me, what are American options today after what's happened? And I said, okay, there's basically 4. They can join in and completely wipe out Iran and lead to regime change. Like, that's one. They can covertly support it, but not sort of publicly be there. So try and, let Israel take as many licks as they want, but not get involved. They can stay out of it. They can be truly isolationist and, the Rubio statement. Or maybe the Donald is angling for his Nobel Peace Prize. They come in as the great peacemaker. They say, we have made peace between Iran and Israel. We're going to tariff both of you unless you stop throwing the missiles and the drones at each other. Sit down against the table and figure this out. I'm asking you, the question there is, where do you think the United States goes from here? Do you think the United States wanted this and wanted the excuse that Israel's opening for it? Or do you think that the United States was like, okay, we'll use Israeli aggressiveness to get to what we really wanted, which is a deal with this regime?
I mean, I trust President Trump when he tweets. Sorry, I do. So I don't think that he wanted this, because he said that. And that is a problem. That's why his statements today are so aggressive. Marco Rubio's statement when this happened was very terse. Like, no statement about supporting Israel's rights to self-defense. Zero. It was like, hey, America was not participant in this.
Yeah, the French statement was friendlier towards Israel than Marco Rubio's statement.
Right. And then the next day, Trump is saying like, I told you so. Better make a deal. And it's like, I don't like, that's bravado, right? Because this is embarrassing for the U.S. actually. It shows it can't control its vassals. And Israel is effectively saying, we're not your vassal. We're going to do whatever we want. And that's...
So you don't believe the conspiracy theory that actually, like, the United States wanted Israel to do this secretly?
One of the greatest South Park episodes is the one about 9/11. It's when the boys find out that 9/11 was an inside job.
Mm-hmm.
And they pursue this to its core. And George W. Bush and the cabinet basically imprisons them. Because they find out that it wasn't an inside job. But they find out that the U.S. government is propagating the myth that they blew up the Twin Towers. And so the boys confront George W. Bush in the episode, and they're like, why are you propagating the rumor that you did this? And George W. Bush says an incredible statement. And by the way, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you have to watch this to cleanse yourself of that stupidity. And George W. Bush looks at the little boys and says, if people don't think that we did it, they'll think we're incompetent. If they find out that a bunch of dudes in caves destroyed the Twin Towers in New York City, they'll think that we, the U.S. government, is incompetent. So yes, we're propagating these rumors. So this is
South Park is truly the Brothers Karamazov of our time. This is basically the Grand Inquisitor updated with
when I was doing my
that are happening right now.
Listen, Jacob, when I was doing my PhD, I kept referencing South Park so much in my PhD philosophy class. Yeah, I had to take philosophy, for political science PhD, and my professor was just like, "Can you make me a DVD of like the greatest hits? Because clearly I've missed this in my academic studies." Like, so yeah, I agree with you. But here's what I'm saying. Of course, Trump is going to say, and of course, the media machine in America is going to say, like, "Oh, we knew. Yeah, we've been in on this planning from day one." That's the whole thing. We're not incompetent. Our ally Israel didn't just do something behind our back, embarrassing us, quite frankly, because we were about to meet with the Iranians on Sunday. So yeah. I believe none of these rumors. And I don't care. Like, we could have Marco Rubio on this podcast, and he'll be like, "No, Marco, you don't know." I'm like, "Shut up. I do know." Fuck off. Of course, yeah. Yeah, you guys were like in on it. No, you weren't. You got spooked.
That would be fun, actually, to have little Marco, and you can be big Marco, I guess.
I guess I can. I mean, I guess so. I don't know. I don't think he's that little. I think that's unfair. But listen, here's my point. Of course they didn't know. They got caught completely unaware. So what do you think is going to happen the next day? Like, no, they're going to be like, "Yeah, we were. Of course we knew." Like remember when Trump was like, "Heads up, heads up."
And I think Trump, to a point we've made over and over again, like, Trump has many faults. He's a master at social media and positioning. Yeah. He's positioned, the United States to make it seem like he knew what was going all along and this was good. But like, now he has a choice. Does he use that to, at least in his Truth Social post, it was about, all right, like, you have to negotiate or else you're going to die.
Well, the problem with that, you know what the problem with that is? What? The problem with that, Jacob, is if I'm Iran, I'm like, bro, come on, man. I just listened to Geopolitical Cousins. And Marco is right. You didn't know. And if you don't know, how can you guarantee to me that you can stop Israel? If I make a deal with you, oh, okay, cool. We're going to make a deal and I'm going to get to keep my nuclear program for civilian uses. What if it's not there? Because Israel, your vassal state, keeps bonding me. Like, if you cannot control Israel, so this is the problem for the U.S. If they cannot control Israel, how can they make a deal with Iran? And so that's why this is not just a funny little question, where we're like, hey, what did America know? Watch South Park. No, I mean, it's actually very critical to this whole situation. Israel is fronting as if they're going to continue this operation for the next 2 weeks. That's what Netanyahu said. This is not a one-day operation. And the U.S. is supposed to meet in Muscat in Oman with Iranian officials. And by the way, the hilarious part of this is U.S. is like, "We're still coming."
Yeah, and the Iranians who were supposed to come might be dead. They might not be alive.
How do I get to Muscat, bro? Like, if I get in a plane, am I going to land in Oman? There's there's Israelis are buzzing around me like hornets. I'm going to get in a plane and go to Oman. You don't know what's going on in the region, America. This is what I'm now being Iran, right? Like, America, you have no idea what's going on here. You want me to get on a plane and cross the Persian Gulf and land in Oman, in Muscat, so I can meet with you. For what reason? You can't control Israel. Why would I continue these negotiations? And this is where what Israel did is truly pernicious from an American perspective. And I do think so. When we think about this from a profound level, like, what's profound about this attack? It's the break between Israel and the U.S. I don't buy for 1 second that the U.S. was aware of this operation for weeks. Now there's a talk how it lulled Iran to sleep by continuing the negotiation. Shut up. Again, watch South Park episode. This is America just trying to make itself look like they weren't completely unaware of what was going to happen.
No. I think credit to the Israelis. Like, there was a psychological warfare aspect where they lulled the Iranians to sleep.
For sure. I mean, obviously, but they loved Americans as well. And I think the problem now is how can you be a credible negotiator? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have two lighthearted points and then a more serious one. The first is when you were talking about Israel like wanting to bring the United States in. It's ironic because that's basically the reverse Al Qaeda. Like that was Al Qaeda's strategy, like bomb the World Trade Centers and then you're going to invite a bigger response and then people are going to overthrow the regime that you don't like. So funny to see the Israelis taking a page out of Osama's book. And then also, has it struck you that like Israel is the real MAGA actor in the world? Like in the last week, they've bombed the shit out of Iran and arrested Greta Thunberg and embarrassed her and then sent her back to Sweden without her lunch money or whatever. Like I think they're the ones that are really doubling down on this. But the deeper point I wanted to say was, and this is the part that makes me nervous about what happens next. Because I think we're in agreement, I think, on most of the things that we talked about. But it seems to me that Iran's back is against the wall. They have no good options. They're screwed. And to your point, they can't, even the negotiation with the United States is not something they can credibly do. To your point just now about Israel, you can't control, your dog is off the leash. Like there's this Israeli actor that's just going to keep bombing us. Why should we make any deal? And it seems to me that if they're truly desperate and if they have any nuclear material to go with or any kind of last ditch effort, like, can they just really maybe they sit there and take the punishment? Maybe I'm like underestimating that as a potential choice.
It depends. I mean, yes, I hear you. I think it depends what the U.S. now offers them and how much, look, I think that this was 80% domestic politics, 20% strategy, to be honest with you, on Israel's part. So that's my view. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu had to do this for domestic political reasons.
Yeah, I mean, he had his far right religious partners were talking about leaving the coalition. So you're on firm ground. You're on terra firma there. And
if he loses power, who knows what happens to him? So I think that, I buy that conspiracy theory, if you will. So here's what's going to happen, I think. There is a path here. It's a narrow one, but I think that if he did enough, then he can tell the Americans, like, okay, go make a deal. Like, I'll tone this down. Like, I'll be amenable now that I've done this, and maybe a couple of more days of like some targets, I'm amenable to being put back into the box. And that opens up a chance for Iran to retaliate against Israel. Nobody will care about that, by the way. Nobody, like U.S. is not going to care. Like that already happened. We already set the threshold for caring, and it's pretty low. Like Israel is going to be under attack by Iran for the next like couple of weeks, and everyone's going to move on from that. The question is,
in part, everybody's going to move on because Iran can't seem to do anything. Like
can't seem to do anything. Yeah. So like, why not? Like last time, I think they attacked Israel. They killed a Bedouin.
Yeah.
In the Negev. Right. That's what happened. Like a piece of shrapnel hit a poor guy in the desert. So what I would say is, it really depends. If it's 80-20 domestic politics, then Benjamin Netanyahu walks away from this looking tough and concedes to the U.S. the ground to negotiate with Iran. Like, okay, fine. I did what I need to do. I'm going to stay in power. I'm going to continue with, securing Israel in my own way. You guys go deal with Iran now. But that requires, of course, restraint from Iran. And so far, we've seen it. The first statement by Iran after this event happened included America. The state media also said that U.S. is responsible. Mm-hmm. That's what happened right after the attack. The statement today by the foreign minister clearly focused on Israel. The drones that have attacked Israeli territory in retaliation, of course, it's just the first retaliation, but they could have easily diverted some to U.S. installations. They didn't. Mm-hmm. Or U.S., naval vessels in the Persian Gulf. Like, there's all sorts of things they can do. To me, the threshold for Iran, and what will tell us whether they're open for negotiations or not, is this. This is what you need to watch. If they don't attack naval vessels in the Persian Gulf that are just floating around, either American or civilian tankers, that's important. The second is Saudi energy facilities, which I highly doubt they will, but I'm just putting it out there. And then, as I said, the air base in Qatar that the U.S. shares with the Qatari military, and then the Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, in Manama. So that to me, if they attack those, I think that they're going for broke. If they don't, if this is just about Israel and maybe some symbolic attack against some American facilities in Iraq. Now, the reason I say that that's not part of the threshold is our listeners should remember that on January 3rd, 2020, the U.S. assassinated General Soleimani of the IRGC. Iran retaliated by attacking American facilities in Iraq with cruise missiles, and the U.S. did not retaliate. In fact, Donald Trump tweeted something like, I respect this. Like, I know they had to retaliate. I now consider this matter over. Vice President Harris actually brought that statement up in her debates with Trump to illustrate that he was cavalier about American servicemen injuries. This actually...
I hadn't thought about her yet. I'm glad you brought her up. Do you remember her 60 Minutes interview?
Of course I do.
It was 60 Minutes where she said Iran was the biggest foreign policy threat to the United States. Man, maybe the Israelis would have liked her better than Trump.
No, but one thing I will say, Jacob, is in my annual forecast in December of 2024, and I hate saying, like I was right, but like because of that 60-minute interview, that Harris gave, and because of the increase in enrichment, this was the easiest call to make, maybe in my career, to say that kinetic action against Iran is the greatest risk in 2025. In fact, I went as far as to say in that annual outlook that it would happen on January 21st. That the day after Trump's inauguration, he would begin conflict with Iran.
And if it had been up to Benjamin Netanyahu, I'm sure that would have happened.
And I caveated it by saying rhetorical or kinetic. But what's interesting is that for 6 months, he kind of, put an egg on all of the hawks' faces. Not hawks. I'm not a hawk, but like a bear or whatever you want to call me. Like somebody, alarmists. He really kind of like took us for a ride there for 6 months, negotiating with Iran in a much more conciliatory way than he usually does. And I would say that in a way, he's to blame for this, in that he should have applied his 7 steps to maximum pressure. He should have been a lot harder. He should have actually done what I said and been very aggressive on January 21st. Kill someone right away, like he did with General Soleimani. Just boom, drone off somebody. Just to send a message to Iran, hey man, I'm serious. You can't drag me along the way you did with Biden, with his negotiations. And I think that the problem is Donald Trump almost proved why his own negotiating style works. And whatever he's been doing for the past 6 months with Iran doesn't work. Like he lost control of these negotiations because he was a little bit too establishment, a little bit too CFR. He wasn't Donald Trump enough. Remember, just a little reminder for everyone listening, on January 3rd, 2020, when they killed Soleimani, the U.S. was negotiating with Iran at the time in Oman. They just killed this guy as a what's up. That's what Donald Trump did. I firmly believe that had he won the 2020 election, there would have been a deal with Iran right away because Iran was like, oh my God. And I think that they themselves were like, oh, look at this. This guy wants peace and he wants low oil prices. So he's not going to bomb us, And I think they took that narrative, that meme, too far. In fact, I had several clients say to me, but Donald Trump wants low oil prices. And I'm like, look, he does, but he's not myopic. He doesn't need them tomorrow. If oil prices go to $120 for a month, like the world's not going to end. It's not.
Well, yeah, and they're not going. I mean, they were up 11% when I went to sleep last night. They were up 6.5% this morning. So,
because Iran is following the pattern of last year because it's not retaliating against ways that oil prices will go up.
Yeah.
One last thing I want to say. Yeah. I do also hear a lot of people say, "But wait a minute, what does this mean for inflation and so on?" Don't worry about it. Just do not worry about it. And I'll tell you why. There's absolutely no way that any inflationary spike because of conflict in the Middle East is going to lead to central banks around the world raising interest rates. Are you nuts? Jay Powell is not going to do the bidding of the supreme leader. He's not going to raise interest rates to slow down the pace of the economy as some robot, some automaton. Oh, energy prices rising, must raise interest rates. No, bro, Iran is attacking global shipping. No, we're not. They're not going to raise interest rates. Not even consider it. And that's why I would definitely, fading oil on day one of this is dumb. You should definitely not do that. But fading the market move, you absolutely should do this. There's no way that this is going to be negative for stocks. And by the way, it's right now noon New York time on Friday the 13th, and S&P 500 is down 0.44. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's good for defense stocks literally everywhere. I'm glad that you brought up Soleimani, because that might be a good way to land the plane here. Because the Soleimani thing gets to the point about Iranian domestic politics. We've talked a little bit about the US and about Israel. But if you think about Iranian domestic politics, I mean, you're right, it's really complicated. So we're not going to be able to treat it with the nuance that it deserves. But think of it in terms of hardliners like the IRGC and who believe in the revolution and everything else versus the pragmatists. Rouhani, really the most recent one, but who want to have their cake and eat it too. They want Iran to be part of the global economy. They want to relax some of the religious restrictions, but okay, you can have the revolution. And these two factions sort of squaring off against each other. And I think one of the strategic reasons to off Soleimani, not just that you're sending a message, you're also getting rid of the leader who was on the hardliner side, the one who was going to be opposing negotiations tooth and nail. So if you can empower the pragmatists to some extent, and then I'm just like buttressing your point about there probably would have been a deal, because getting rid of Soleimani and throwing the IRGC into chaos, maybe you can make an argument that now you're giving some power to the pragmatists going forward. But just to say that, like, there's also an internal Iranian issue here. And I think when we're thinking sort of, as you said, profoundly about what happens next, I think there's a lot to be said about like Israel getting short-term benefit, but at what long-term cost? The changing nature of war, like another example of intelligence and drones and technology enabling things that even 10 years ago might not have been possible. And then, like, what does this mean for the future of Iran long term? Because eventually Iran is going to come in from the cold, and when it does, it will be one of the greatest frontier opportunities ever. I mean, like, it's an incredible country with incredible human capital and resources and all these other sorts of things, and it will not be isolated forever. So I'm always sort of waiting from that perspective. But I think we'll be waiting a lot longer.
Since we're doing kind of closing statements, here's what I would say. I would say that geopolitics is a funny thing, and we as humans, we desensitize. Mm-hmm. We're starting to desensitize to what I've been saying is a multipolar world since 2011. That's been my call. Think about it. 10 years ago, if you told me just that Israel and Iran would exchange cruise missile fire, which is what happened last year, mm-hmm. I would have said oil prices are 150 right away. And here we are. Not only has Israel been attacked by a massive terrorist attack supported by Iran in some capacity, even tangentially, on October 7th. Not only have we lived through that, but that happened almost 2 years ago. Since then, Israel and Iran have exchanged cruise missile fire. And now Israel has attacked Iran and might attack it again. And S&P 500 is down 0.4%, which is like a random day. Oil prices are up more than they've ever been up. Intraday, I think we hit a significant increase in oil prices, so no doubt there. But, they're like 6%, and the world's not ending, and people are like, yeah, I mean, I guess Iran is going to retaliate against Israel. Like, whatever. Like, it is what it is. This is the world we live in. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, India and Pakistan exchanged fire. Mm-hmm. You and I barely got to squeeze them in between the NBA finals and like the fiscal bill in the United States. This is very interesting to me, and I think it's something for everyone on this call who's listening. If you're an investor, this is really important for you. But if you're just a regular person, like listening to our podcast, trying to figure out what's going on with the world, this is the world. It doesn't mean that the world is descending into chaos and there's going to be a World War III at the end of the rainbow. This can just be our world for the next 50 years. This is what the 19th century looked like. And it's considered the longest period of peace. The long peace, 1812 to 1914. 100 years of what we consider peace was interspersed with conflicts that just did not blow out of their region, And I think that's what I would end it on. This is interesting. We had India, Pakistan. We have this. We had Armenia, Azerbaijan, Russia, Ukraine. Like things are cooking here, there. There's a lot of pots on our stove of geopolitics, but none of them are really overflowing. And that is what multipolarity is like. It sucks because it means people will die more so than when somebody's in charge. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that every conflict immediately has to become a regional conflagration. And I don't think a lot of people have really wrapped their brains around that fact because they just don't know enough history. And human history is about multipolarity. It's not about hegemony or
Yeah, or wrap their brains around the fact at how geopolitically insignificant the Middle East has become. The Middle East was important in the latter half of the 20th century for two reasons. Number one, oil. Number two, it was a proxy battleground between the United States and the Soviet Union.
Soviet
The
Union,
Cold War
exactly.
is over. There's no China doing battle with the United States
No, they
over,
had the same
via the
interest.
proxies via Iran. Like, it's all the same. So that's gone.
No,
And oil, nobody gives a frack.
well,
Literally, you like that? Like, the United States has oil,
nice.
and the Chinese are building reactors, and Europe's doing hydrogen. Like, they're on borrowed time. That's why
That's the
Mohammed bin
title.
Salman is building, Neom in the middle of the desert, because they're on borrowed time.
Just to be clear, they would if Iran had the minerals, the balls to attack the facilities, but Saudi Arabia's moved on. And the other issue that I don't think we also have wrapped our brains around, U.S. taxpayers, by supporting the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, are defending Chinese strategic interests. Let me say that again. If you're an American listening to this, you're paying taxes in parts so China can be safe. Because it's not U.S. oil supply that the Fifth Fleet is guarding, is the rest of the world's. And that's maybe the one vestigial part of unipolarity, of hegemony that America still performs. I know you got to go, so we can wrap it on this. All I would say is that Chinese and American interests are not that misaligned when it comes to the Middle East. And Chinese statement after this conflict was pretty muted. They didn't really just support Iran. They kind of said, hey, both sides need to calm down. And I think that that's interesting as well. I think that's a very nuanced point you're saying, Jacob. In other words, this Soviet Union and the US had clearly delineated interests. It's not that clear anymore.
No, and I guess it's shame on us for leaving it on this and only bringing them up now, because for me, the real question is, okay, President Erdogan, what's your move? Because if this is your backyard, if this is the Neo-Ottoman Empire, if all these powers are like whatever, like this is Turkey's backyard, and now you've got Israel and Iran like with blows. And maybe that's good for you. Maybe you want to break out the popcorn and deal with whoever is left over afterwards. But like Turkey is the quiet one that is like we should all be watching how they react, because that's probably going to define this more than anything else.
You took you very high in our draft. So you took Turkey high in the draft.
Yeah,
so let's see it.
Did.
Let's see that potential.
I'm waiting.
All right. All right. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.